There is a principle I learned not in the libraries of Florence, nor in the councils of princes, but in the quieter, more brutal classroom of exile. When a man permits disrespect without consequence, he does not merely lose a moment. He loses position. He loses credibility. He loses the invisible architecture that makes other men cautious around him. And once that architecture collapses, it does not rebuild from apology. It does not rebuild from explanation. It rebuilds only from consequence, delivered calmly, deliberately, and without theatre. Most men believe that patience is wisdom, that absorbing insult demonstrates character, that the man who does not react is somehow elevated by his restraint. I observed this belief in courts. I observed it in councils. I observed it among men who were dismissed quietly while they smiled and endured. Patience is not the same as permission, and that distinction is everything. If disrespect costs nothing, it will repeat. Not because men are inherently vicious, though many are, but because human nature moves toward the path of least resistance. When a man finds that he may diminish you without consequence, he files that information away. It is stored not in malice, but in calculation. The next offence comes more easily. The one after that comes without hesitation. What began as a test becomes a habit. What began as a habit becomes a public understanding. And a public understanding of your tolerance becomes the end of your standing. You did not lose your reputation in a single moment of weakness. You surrendered it across 100 moments of tolerance. This is what I must explain to you today. Not how to rage, not how to destroy those who offend you. See, but how to make disrespect so costly that the calculation changes before the offence is even attempted. How to build around your name a perimeter of consequence that is understood without announcement. One lesson delivered calmly is remembered forever. Before I was exiled from Florence, before the Medici returned, and the republic I had served collapsed, and I was dragged into a cell and questioned with ropes, I had spent years in the service of observation. I watched Cesare Borgia. I studied his methods not with admiration for the man, but with the cold attention of a physician examining a mechanism. He was precise. He was terrifying, not because he shouted or stormed or displayed his fury in open courts, but because every man around him understood, with perfect clarity, that crossing him produced a visible and unforgettable result. He did not explain this. He did not announce it. He demonstrated it, and demonstration is worth more than proclamation. I learned something else in those years of diplomatic service. Reputation is not what you say about yourself. Reputation is the story other men tell when you are not in the room. And that story is constructed almost entirely from what they have observed you tolerate and what they have seen you refuse. A man who accepts diminishment in silence teaches others that diminishment is acceptable. A man who responds to provocation with measured, cold consequence teaches others that provocation is expensive. These are not lessons delivered through speeches. They are written in the memory through action. When I returned to Sant'Andrea in Casciano after my release, stripped of office, he stripped of the purpose that had defined my adult life. I understood something I had only theorized before. Power is not a position. Power is a perception, and perception is maintained through behavior. Even in exile, among men who owed me nothing, I had a choice. I could have become small. I could have accepted condescension with the gratitude of a man who needs charity. Instead, I maintained what I carried internally, a precise awareness of what I would and would not permit, where I drew the boundary between my dignity and the world's indifference. The boundary is not announced. The boundary is enforced. Let me now examine what disrespect truly is, because most men misidentify it. They believe disrespect is an insult spoken openly, a loud offence, a confrontation in public. This is the least dangerous form. Disrespect more often arrives quietly. It arrives in the slight delay before your words are acknowledged, in the meeting where your contributions are heard and then attributed to another, in the invitation that does not come, in the tone that suggests your presence is provisional, in the small renegotiations that accumulate, where agreements made to you are quietly revised, where promises become flexible in proportion to how much you have already accepted. Each of these is a probe, a calculation. The man conducting it is asking, in the language of behavior, what will this person allow? He does not always do this consciously. Human nature is not always deliberate, but whether conscious or reflexive, the calculation is real. And the data he collects from your response will govern how he treats you from that moment forward. This is why passive tolerance is not neutrality. Passive tolerance is instruction. You are teaching people, with every silence and every graceful absorption, of what should not have been given. You are teaching them the precise boundary of what they can take from you. And men, being opportunistic by nature, will take precisely what they are permitted to take. I observed this in the courts of princes. The advisors most disrespected were not the most incompetent. They were often men of genuine capability, but they had made a pattern visible, a pattern of accepting diminishment without response. And once that pattern was established, it could not be undone. The court is a theatre where every interaction is performed before an audience always drawing conclusions. A prince who is not obeyed is not a prince. A counsellor dismissed without consequence is not a counsellor. He is furniture. Now consider this carefully. There are men who respond to disrespect with explosion. They make their offence theatrical. They raise voices. They demand satisfaction in terms that embarrass everyone present, including themselves. They confuse volume with authority. They mistake visible fury for power. These men are not respected. They are managed. Their handlers have learned exactly which lever produces the reaction, and that lever becomes a tool. The man who explodes on command has handed his opponents a mechanism of provoke him, watch him lose composure, and in that moment of spectacle, see whatever credibility he carried before the offence has been transferred to his opponent. This is the irony most men never understand. The emotional explosion feels like power. It feels, in the moment, like rectification. It is neither. It is surrender. The man who screams has shown what moves him. The man who is shown what moves him can be moved at will. This is why the only correct response to disrespect is calibrated, cold, deliberate, and proportionate to the offence in a way that leaves no ambiguity about the lesson being delivered. The lesson is simple. This will not happen again. Not spoken, demonstrated. Let me describe what calm retaliation looks like, because I do not wish to leave this principle in abstraction. A man at your level of position, in whatever court you navigate, whether it is the court of commerce, of profession, of social standing, makes an assumption about you. He speaks over you in a room of witnesses. He diminishes your contribution in the presence of those whose regard you have built carefully over time. The inferior man rises. He protests. He argues at volume. He has made the offence into spectacle and placed himself inside that spectacle as the offended party. Every witness is uncomfortable. Every witness is drawing conclusions, not about the original offender, but about the man who lost composure. The calculated man does something different. He does not respond in the moment. His face reveals nothing. His voice, if he speaks, is measured and precise. He may correct the factual record without drama. A clear sentence that restores accuracy without the apparatus of outrage. Or he may say nothing at all. But afterward, privately, deliberately, without witnesses, he withdraws something. Access, collaboration, the small generosities that men never notice until they are absent. He restructures the relationship to reflect its new reality. He does not explain this restructuring. He does not announce it, he simply implements it. And the other man, sensing the change, understanding its source without being told, receives the message with the full weight that silence gives it. Public explanation invites debate. Silent consequence invites reflection. Reflection is far more instructive. There are moments, however, when the offence is public enough that private response is insufficient. When diminishment occurs before witnesses whose opinion forms part of your standing, private correction reaches only the offender. The witnesses have received no data about your response. In these cases, the correction must be visible. But visible does not mean theatrical. A single sentence, a quiet reversal of the assumption the offence created, delivered without raised voice, without visible anger. I have watched men correct disrespect with a single question, delivered calmly, that required the offender to either reverse himself or expose the emptiness of his position. This is not aggression. This is architecture. You are reconstructing, in public, the impression that was damaged. The ease with which you do it tells every witness something more damaging to the offender than any argument could. This man was not threatened. He has simply corrected an error. The impression of effortlessness is itself a demonstration of standing. The man who must fight to defend his reputation reveals that he is uncertain of it. The man who corrects without urgency reveals that his reputation is not in danger, only the offender's judgment. Now I arrive at what I consider the most powerful instrument in this doctrine, withdrawing access. Men do not understand the weight of this. They believe that power is expressed in what you do to others, in confrontation, in visible application of force. But the most devastating response to disrespect is not what you do. It is what you stop providing. Consider what it means to have access to a man of standing, to be included in his counsel, to receive his attention, to benefit from his connections, his knowledge, or his willingness to expend effort on your behalf. These are goods flowing from a relationship governed by mutual respect. When a man disrespects you and you respond by withdrawing these goods, quietly, without drama, without explanation, the consequence arrives slowly, then suddenly. He does not notice immediately. The first absence is easily explained away. The second is noted. The third begins the calculation. Has something changed? When he understands what has changed and why, and that the change is not negotiable, that it will not be undone by apology, that it will not soften because time has passed, he has received a lesson more permanent than any confrontation could deliver. He has learned that your regard is something worth protecting. He has learned this through its absence. So we do not learn the value of water from abundance. We learn it from thirst. The prince who banishes a counsellor teaches every remaining counsellor something. The lesson is not about cruelty. It says, what I bring to a relationship is not unconditional. It is earned, and when behaviour disqualifies it, it is withdrawn. This is not punishment in the theatrical sense. This is the natural consequence of the natural law. Nothing of value can be held at no cost. Why do men test others with disrespect? I have thought about this at length, in those years of study when I had nothing but time and the ancient writers for company. Men who test with disrespect are, at their foundation, uncertain. Not always consciously, but beneath the calculation, the probe, the offence, there is a man who does not know precisely where he stands, who needs to establish hierarchy by testing its edges. This is why the man who does not react as expected, who neither crumbles nor explodes, destabilizes the tester. The tester had a prediction. Either you would crumble, confirming that you are beneath him, or you would explode, confirming that you can be moved. When neither happens, his model of you is disrupted. He must recalibrate. And in that recalibration, doubt enters. Doubt about whether his assessment was accurate. Doubt about what you are actually capable of. Doubt, most importantly, about what your calmness conceals. This doubt is your most effective protection. He does not know what you will do. He does not know the full measure of your response. An uncertainty in the calculation of risk always adds weight to the cost column. The unpredictable man is expensive to antagonize. The predictably patient man is cheap. Making disrespect expensive is not merely a tactical choice. It is a philosophical position about the nature of your own value, a declaration made through behavior rather than words, that your regard is not free, that your cooperation carries conditions, that your name, your attention, your association, these are things worth respecting, because they are things worth having. The man who does not make this declaration, by behavior, will have it denied by others. He will find his regard treated as free because it has been provided freely. He will find his cooperation assumed because it has never been conditional. I watched this happen to able men throughout my years in Florence, and men of genuine capability who had not learned to value themselves in a way others could observe. Their knowledge was used, their labour was consumed, their loyalty was accepted as a resource, and they were not respected, not because they lacked merit, but because merit offered unconditionally is not perceived as merit. It is perceived as supply. Supply does not command respect. Scarcity does. This leads me to the escalation ladder, because disrespect is not always a single event. It is more often a pattern. Different stages of the pattern require different responses. The first offence, if minor and perhaps ambiguous, warrants almost nothing. a slight recalibration of warmth, a note in your private ledger, attention directed toward whether this was a probe or an error. The second offence clarifies. The pattern is emerging. The second offence warrants correction. Private, composed, and unambiguous. Not an argument. A clear statement delivered without drama. What occurred is noted. It is not acceptable, and its repetition will change the terms of this relationship. No threat is required. The clarity of the statement is the consequence. You have placed a marker in the ground, visible only to him, that says, I am aware and I am not indifferent. The third offence, after such a statement, is a choice. He has tested you. He has been corrected. He has now decided, with knowledge of the correction, to repeat the behaviour. This is no longer error. This is the calculation that you are still the lesser party, and it must be answered accordingly. The response at this stage is structural, not verbal. It is withdrawal of access. It is restructuring of the relationship to match its demonstrated reality. It may, depending on context and severity, be public, not theatrical, not angry, simply visible. A visible withdrawal communicates to the surrounding court what private correction cannot, that you have a standard, that it has been violated, and that violations produce change. The court does not only observe the prince, it observes what the prince permits. A prince who permits rudeness from his advisers will find that all his advisers begin testing the same boundary. A man who permits casual diminishment from associates will find every associate calibrates to the demonstrated tolerance. You are always teaching. The question is only what you are teaching. There is a belief, widespread and persistent, and that the dignified response to disrespect is silence, endurance, elevation above the offence. This belief flatters the man who holds it because it allows him to feel superior while being diminished. I am above this, he tells himself. I do not lower myself to engage. But in the external theatre, where standing is determined by observation and memory, no such elevation is recorded. What is recorded is the tolerance. What is remembered is the silence. Dignity without consequence is invisible. It protects the feeling, not the standing. I had considerable inner dignity throughout my years of exile. Inner dignity did not restore my position. What eventually rebuilt my standing, not fully, not as it had been, but enough, was the continued demonstration that I remained someone worth respect, that my mind was still formidable, that proximity to me still carried value. Reputation is armour, but armour must be forged. The man who has built no genuine standing cannot simply manufacture the impression of consequence. The impression must be grounded. Making disrespect expensive is not only a strategy of response, it is a strategy of construction. Every day, through the quality of your work and the precision of your judgment, every day you are building or eroding the value that others measure when they calculate the cost of diminishing you. If there is nothing behind the boundary, and if the withdrawal of your cooperation removes nothing worth having, the withdrawal carries no weight. Fear is more reliable than affection. Not because affection is worthless, but because affection is contingent. It depends on mood, on circumstance, on how convenient it is to feel warmly toward you at a given moment. Fear of consequence does not fluctuate with mood. It is a structural element of the relationship. It says, the cost of crossing this man is known, and it is remembered even when all other facts about you are forgotten. A man may forget your kindness. He will not forget the one time he discovered your limits were real. The men most consistently respected, throughout the courts I studied, were not the most generous, not the most pleasant, not even the most powerful in formal terms. They were the men whose limits were most reliably enforced. A man who says no and means it. A man who sets a condition and holds it. A man who, when something is taken that should not have been taken, reclaims it without drama but with absolute finality. And this man does not need to announce himself. His history announces him. When you walk into a room carrying a reputation for enforcing your standards, the people in that room have already calculated the cost of testing you. Most will decide the cost is too high, and that decision requires no effort from you at all. The goal is not to fight for your standing repeatedly. The goal is to build the standing so clearly and defend it so consistently that fights become rare. The prince who must execute men daily has failed as a prince. The prince whose reputation is such that execution is seldom necessary has succeeded. Men judge with their eyes. They observe. They remember. They distribute through their networks what they have seen. And the story that circulates about you, the story told in the rooms you are not in, is the sum of everything you have taught them. Making disrespect expensive does not mean seeking offence where none was intended. The man who sees challenge in every comment, who demands perfect deference from every interaction. This man is not demonstrating strength. He is demonstrating fragility. What I am describing is discrimination, the ability to distinguish between the careless, the ambiguous, and the deliberate. The careless warrants a mental note. The ambiguous warrants observation. The deliberate warrants response, calibrated to severity, delivered at the appropriate time, with the appropriate degree of visibility. This requires judgment. Judgment requires composure. The man who cannot remain composed in the face of provocation is telling everyone watching that provocation is effective against him. The man who remains composed is telling everyone watching that he is not rattled, that he has seen worse, that whatever is coming, he has the resources to manage it. I spent years learning the difference between men who were actually powerful and men who performed power. The performers were identifiable by their reactivity. They needed the world to confirm them constantly. When confirmation was not given, they erupted or collapsed. The actually powerful men were identifiable by a settled certainty, a willingness to let the world take whatever posture it chose, while they continued their own calculation. They were not indifferent to insult. They were simply not destabilized by it. And from that stable foundation, they responded, when they chose to respond, with precision that left no doubt about the nature of the lesson being delivered. Without inner certainty, the outer response is reactive. Reactive responses are readable. Readable responses are manageable. The man who responds from certainty, not from wound, who delivers consequence from calculation, not from anger, is genuinely difficult to counter. He has not told you what hurt him. He has not shown you where the nerve is. He has only shown you the result of finding it. And the result is enough. Let me state the core doctrine now, collected and clear. Men behave in proportion to the cost of their behavior. When disrespect is free, it is spent liberally. When disrespect carries cost, it is spent cautiously. When disrespect carries certainty, visible, calmly administered consequence, it is not spent at all. Your task is not to punish every slight. Your task is to establish, through a small number of clear demonstrations, that your name has a price. You do this through composure, never showing what moves you. You do this through withdrawal, removing access when access is not deserved. You do this through public correction when necessary, delivered without drama, in the quietest register that still achieves visibility. You do this through consistency, because one lesson contradicted by subsequent tolerance teaches nothing. The lesson is only durable if the standard is maintained. Memory is part of this. Never forget an offence cleanly addressed and then repeated. The repetition after correction is the true measure of how the other man has categorized you, as it is his final statement of his assessment. Respond to it accordingly, not in anger, which he may have predicted, but in a structural, permanent way that demonstrates your assessment of him. You are not worth careful treatment. You will be managed accordingly. This is not cruelty. This is symmetry. He has defined the relationship by his behavior. You are simply accepting his definition and responding to it. The external strategy is only sustainable when the internal foundation is correct. The internal foundation requires that you genuinely do not need the regard of people who have demonstrated they do not merit your regard. We are social creatures. Even those who have learned to present indifference feel, beneath it, the sting of dismissal. The correction is not to eliminate the feeling. The correction is to alter the relationship between the feeling and your behavior. The feeling is information. It is data about where a line has been crossed. The behavior in response must come not from the feeling, but from the calculation. There is a line. The line has been crossed. What response, delivered calmly and precisely, produces the correct result? That is the only question. Not, how do I feel? What response produces the correct result? This separation of feeling from action is the discipline that transforms strategy from theory into practice. The practice is continuous. The court is always watching. The calculation is always running. Build your standing deliberately. Defend it without drama. And never permit the comfortable belief that tolerance is wisdom. Tolerance is investment only when it is chosen. When it is simply the absence of the will to respond, it is not investment. It is surrender on the installment plan. You will not remember the moment you gave it, but the people around you will remember every moment you confirmed it was acceptable to give. Remember this: disrespect is always a question. Your response is always the answer, and the answer you give today will be the expectation they carry into tomorrow. Make the answer clear, make it calm, make it final. A reputation collapses in a moment, and no empire rebuilds from contempt.